In the fall of 1885, in a wheat county on the flat gray edge of central Kansas, a man named Emmett Royce hired a cook for his threshing crew, and before the first frost that woman had bet her whole season's wages that the proudest wheatman in 3 townships had been planting his 300 acres on the wrong day for 15 years running. The county laughed. They laughed for one long, dry autumn, right up until the June wind walked through the wheat and laid every early sown field in the district flat as a threshing floor, 300 acres of Royce grain broken at the knee like a hail had crossed it, every field down but the 40 acres she had made him wait to plant. She had not guessed. She had read a thing off his own broken straw that not one man with a grain drill had ever thought to look for. Emmett Royce was a big, slow, careful man of about 40, with a red neck burned to leather and hands that could span a bushel basket, and he was the man the whole county set its clocks by. When the Royce drill rolled, the county drilled. His late father had built the home place out of nothing but sod and stubbornness, and the old man had left him one iron rule, said so often it had worn a groove, early sown is early grown, and the fall pasture proves it. Get the wheat up green and tall before the snow, let the cattle graze it down through the winter, and you took 2 crops off one seeding. By the 15th of September, the Royce drill had always rolled, 15 straight years, rain or shine, and by October his fields lay green as a spring meadow while his neighbors were still greasing their machines. If you have ever watched a whole town decide that a steady, capable person had finally lost their good sense, then you already know the shape of what happened next. Stay with it. Because for 3 years running now, something had gone wrong in the Royce wheat that the old rule could not explain. 3 springs in a row his stand had come up thin, worse than thin. The straw would rise fine and green and fool a man clear into May, and then, just as the head filled and the field ought to have stood up heavy and gold, the stems would give at the lower joint, and the whole crop would go down in a night, flat and tangled, the heads half-filled and light. He blamed winter kill. He blamed thin soil in the low ground. He blamed a wet spring and then a dry one. He never once blamed the 15th of September, because his father had set that date, and to question the date was to question the dead. His neighbors had the same trouble, most of them in the same years, but Emmett Royce was the loudest man in the county, and so his was the failure everyone watched. Into that 3rd bad autumn came the cook. Her name was Nell Carden, and she came off the westbound train at the depot with 1 carpet bag and a flat straw hat. A lean young woman in her middle 20s with sandy hair pinned up plain and a way of looking straight at a thing until it told her the truth. She had grown up on a wheat farm in Indiana that the bad years had broken and sold out from under her family, and she had cooked for threshing crews from Ohio to the Dakotas since she was 16. She hired on to feed the Royce crew through the run for a set wage, board included, and she asked for the whole of it in one payment at the end, which the men thought odd and Emmett thought fair. In her apron pocket she carried a small book. It was her dead father's field book, a cheap pocket ledger gone soft as cloth at the corners. Its pages close written in pencil, with sowing dates and weather and yields going back 30 years. On one page, underlined twice and gone gray with handling, her father had written a single line she knew by heart: "Never let the drill roll while the fly still flies." She did not tell anyone about the book, not at first. Here was the thing the men at the depot could not have known, and the thing this whole story turns on. 2 people had come to that wheat county each still minding a dead father's rule. One of them minded it blind, because it was a comfort and a habit and the shape of grief. The other minded it exact, because her father had bled to understand it. That was the whole quarrel, though neither of them had said a word of it yet. The threshing run went well enough. She fed 20 hungry men 3 times a day out of a cook shack on a wagon, and she fed them better than they were used to, and by the second week even the sourest hand on the crew tipped his hat when she came out with the coffee. In the evenings, when the work was done, she walked the stubble fields. Emmett saw her out there in the low light more than once, bent over, turning a broken stem in her fingers, and he took her for a farm woman missing her home ground and thought no more of it. Then, one evening, at the long supper table, she set it down in front of him. It was a single broken wheat stem off his own worst field, the straw gone straw gold and dry, snapped clean at the lowest joint. She had split the leaf sheath back with her thumbnail, and there, tucked against the stem where the sheath had hidden it, sat a row of tiny hard cases, brown and shining, and shaped for all the world like flaxseed. "You have got the fly," she said. "Same as broke my father. It is not your winter, it is not your ground. Your wheat stands up green in September when the fly comes to lay. And it lays in your best fields, and by June the grub has girdled your straw, and down she goes. You are planting straight into the teeth of it." The table went quiet all at once, the quiet of 20 men waiting to see how the boss would take it. Then somebody laughed, and then they all did, and Emmett Royce laughed longest of all. Because a hired cook had just stood up at his own supper table and told him his father was a fool. "Little bugs," he said, when he could talk. 15 years my family has farmed this section by that date, and the cook off the train has it figured in a fortnight. Sit down, girl, eat your supper. 20 years my family farmed by the wrong one, she said, and she did not sit, and she did not laugh. It cost us the farm, and it cost my father his heart, and I will bet you it is costing you yours, one crop at a time. You will bet me, he said. With what? With everything you are set to pay me, she said. Every cent of my season. And because she was proud too, and because being laughed at had struck a nerve-worn raw a long time ago, she said the thing that started everything. "Give me 40 acres, she said. "Ground you would have drilled by the middle of the month like always. Let me hold it bare and unsown until the 5th of October, 20 days past your date. Plant your other fields your way, on your day, and we will let the seasons judge. If my strip does not beat yours to the wagon come harvest, you keep every cent of my season's wages. And if it does, you re-sow this whole place on my calendar next fall. A hired cook, staking a summer's pay against a man's dead father." Emmett Royce should have said no. A kinder man might have, or a smaller one. But he was proud, and the whole crew was watching, and so he reached across the table and shook her hand to shame her, and the bet was made. He gave her the worst 40 he had, a squarish piece along the draws on the north end, and he told the crew, still grinning, to let the fallow girl have her way with it. The name stuck before the plates were cleared, the fallow girl. It ran to the mill porch and the church steps and the feed store inside of a week, and men who had never met her asked after the fallow girl and her patch of weeds. The first thing she did with her 40 acres was not plant them. It was the opposite. All along the draws and the field edges, wherever last year's shattered grain had sprouted on its own into a green fuzz of volunteer wheat, she had the crew hitch up and plow it under, every green blade of it, clean. The men grumbled. Volunteer made fair fall pasture and cost a man nothing. But she walked the whole boundary and would not rest until every stray green shoot within a quarter-mile of her strip was turned under and dead. "That is the nursery," she said, when a hand asked her why, and she would say no more than that. She would not yet say a nursery for what. Then she waited, and that was the hard part, because waiting looks like doing nothing, and a whole county was watching her do it. His sowing date came, clear and fine, the middle of September, and the Royce drill rolled across the big fields as it always had, and by the end of the month 300 acres lay under a green haze, coming up thick and lush and beautiful. And beside it her 40 acres lay bare and brown and idle, not a seed in the ground, drawing every eye that passed on the section road. This is the part the fly counts on, because early sown wheat always looks best in the fall. It is up and green and knee-high going into winter, while the late stuff is a bare field or a thin whisker of green, and every instinct a wheatman has tells him the green field is the winning field. It looked, that October, like the cook had already lost. She drilled her 40 acres at last on that October morning, dry ground, into a fine seed bed, and her wheat came up late and low, a thin green stubble against his roaring green carpet, and the mill porch had itself a fine long laugh over that 20 wasted days of hers. Now the county had a patient watcher of its own, and his name was Silas Doss. Doss farmed the half-section that wrapped around the Royce home place on 2 sides, and he had wanted that ground for 11 years. He was a smooth, unhurried man who never raised his voice, and he had watched the Royce wheat go down 3 springs running with the quiet attention of a man reading a bank ledger. He came around often that fall, leaning on the fence, allowing as how a run of bad crops could break even an old family, allowing as how he would pay a fair price and save a proud man the shame of the bank. He tipped his hat to the follow girl and called her strip a shame and a waste, and he meant every soft word to land. It did land, that was the trouble, because October went dry, bone dry, not a drop for 5 weeks. And the late-drilled strip sat there thin and struggling while the early fields stayed green, and every soul in the county who drove that road could see with their own eyes that the cook had bet wrong. The laughter got easier. Doss got friendlier. And Emmett Royce, who had shaken a woman's hand in front of his crew and staked his father's rule on it, began to feel the whole county's grin on the back of his neck like a sunburn. That was the night it nearly broke. It was late, near the end of a dry October, and he walked out to the bare, struggling strip at dusk with the pay envelope already made up in his coat, her full season's wages counted out in it, meaning to hand it over and call the fool bet done and order the strip drilled his own way while there was still a hair of season left. He had rehearsed the words, "Enough is enough. No shame in it. Here is your pay." She was already out there. She did not argue with him. She just crouched down in his big green early field, the pretty one, the one the whole county admired, and parted the leaf sheath on a fine green stem near the ground, and held it up to what light was left. She had tied a single thread of red wool around the stem where the sheath bulged. "Feel behind there," she said. He put his thick thumbnail to it and felt the small, hard swellings under the sheath, a whole row of them already set into the green straw of his best October field. He did not know yet what they were, but he knew they were not supposed to be there, and he knew his eye had never once thought to look, and he stood a long time in the dark holding that stem with the pay envelope heavy and forgotten in his coat. He put the envelope away. He let her date stand. He did not say why, and neither did she, and they walked back to the house through the dark, not speaking, which for those two was very nearly a conversation. Winter came and covered it all, and the county forgot to laugh through the cold months, and spring came on green and ordinary. Now here is the thing under all of it, the thing she had carried off that train in her apron and would not say plain until the wheat itself said it for her. The insect she had found is what the old wheat men called the Hessian fly, a little dark two-winged thing no bigger than a knot, and its whole cruel trick is in its clock. The fall brood hatches and flies for only a few short weeks, and in that country those weeks fell across September. The fly must lay her eggs on green wheat that is up and growing, because the newborn grub cannot travel. It can only slide down the leaf into the crown of a plant that is already there and settle in behind the sheath to feed. Wheat that is up and green during those September weeks catches the whole brood, and wheat that is not yet planted, that is still dry seed in the sack in early October, offers the fly nothing at all. She flies, she finds no green, she lays where she can, or she dies. And by the time the late seed sprouts, the brood is gone, and the field comes up clean into a world with no fly left in it. That was the whole secret. Not a poison, not a prayer, not a better seed. 20 days of patience and a plowed under nursery so no volunteer green tempted the fly to breed on the place at all. The grubs she had shown him behind the sheath were feeding all winter, hardening into those flaxseed cases, and each case sat right at a joint, and each joint it sat at was a joint the straw would snap a come June, the very second the head grew heavy enough to matter. Early sown was not early grown. Early sown was early eaten. His father had built a rule for a country that did not yet have the fly, and the fly had come. And the rule had turned into a trap with the dead man's name still on it. She knew all of that in September. She said none of it. She let the field be the one to tell him, because a field cannot be argued with, and a dead father can. June came in hot and still, and then the wind rose. It came out of the southwest one afternoon and blew a day and a night, a hard, dry, rolling wind. And it walked through the wheat of the whole county like a hand pressing down a nap of fur. And where it passed over the early sown fields, the fields that had looked so green and so right all winter, the straw let go at every girdled joint at once, and 300 acres of Royce wheat went down in that one night, broken at the knee, the heads flung flat and tangled. A whole crop laid out like a hailstorm had crossed it and touched nothing else. Emmett Royce walked out at first, light into the wreck of it, and he could stand in the middle of his own best field and see clear across it to the ground, every stalk down. And then he turned north toward the draws, toward the 40 acres the county had laughed at, and he stopped where he was. Her strip was standing, clean to the marker's stake at the boundary, drilled 20 days late into a world the fly had already left. Her 40 acres stood up straight and gold and head-heavy in the morning light, so full the heads nodded, not a stem down in the whole of it. The line ran dead straight along the stake. On his side, ruin; on her side, harvest, the only standing wheat near enough. In that whole end of the county. Silas Doss drove out that morning, too, to look at the broken Royce fields with a buyer's quiet eye, and he sat in his buggy at the stake line a long while looking at the one gold strip standing where a cook had said it would. He got down finally and walked to the stake, and he was not a man who let a thing beat him quietly. And he found Nell Carden already there at the line checking her heads. You could not have known, Doss said, not for certain. You guessed, and you got lucky, girl, and a lucky guess is not a science. Split a stem, Silas, she said, and held one out to him across the stake. Peel the sheath, then tell me it was luck. He would not take it. He got back in his buggy and turned his horse around and drove home, and he never made his offer for the Royce ground, that year or any year after. She did not gloat. There is no scene in this story where the cook stands on the mill porch and tells the men what they can do with their calendars. When Emmett came and stood beside her at the line, she only put one heavy head into his hand to weigh. 30 bushels there, near enough, she said. Maybe more. And mine, he said. 7, if the mill is kind. He was quiet a while. My father drilled that date 40 years. So did mine. Near enough, she said. The difference is mine wrote down the year it stopped working. Yours only wrote down the date. And the two of them stood there in the wind, not saying much more, which was still how those two talked. They cut her 40 acres first and hauled it to the mill, and the scale told the last of the story. Her late-sown strip made better than 30 bushels to the acre. His broken early fields, what could be saved of them, threshed out at 7. The whole county knew the numbers by dark, as a county always does. There is one of these stories in near every wheat county in this country, and mostly the proud man never says the words out loud. Emmett Royce said them at the Grange meeting that fall, with the room full and Doss in the back and the mill porch men on the benches. Emmett stood up. He was not a talker, and it cost him, and everybody could see it cost him. He took the little soft-field book out of his coat, the dead father's book the cook had let him carry up there, and he read the underlined line out loud to the room, slow, so they would have it right. Never let the drill roll while the fly still flies, he read. Then he shut the book and looked at them. That is not my father's rule. My father's rule put my whole crop flat on the ground this June. This one belongs to my cook and to her father before her, and I bet a whole season's wages against it this fall to shame the woman for saying it out loud at my own supper table. Nobody laughed now. I lost, he said. She was right about the fly, and my father was wrong about the date, and I have been wrong for 3 crops running because I would rather bury a harvest than question a dead man. I am re-sowing the home place late next fall. Any man here with sense will do the same. Then he counted her wager out on the table in front of the men who had laughed, and he passed the broken straw down the benches so they could feel the flaxseed cases behind the sheath with their own thumbs. It came back up the row to a young hired hand of Doss's, a boy of maybe 17, who turned the straw over twice and then stood up, red to the ears, and spoke without being asked. Mr. Royce, the boy said, Mr. Doss don't know I come tonight, but we lost near as much wheat as you did, and I aim to tell him what I felt in that stem, whether he wants to hear it or not. By the time the boys sat back down, the laughing was all done, and the county had a new date. The whole district drilled late the next fall. The fly year passed them by clean, and the crops came in heavy up and down the section roads. And men who had called her the follow girl in September were calling her the cook that saved the county by harvest, which is a longer name and a truer one. She stayed. Of course she stayed. A woman does not walk a field at dusk with a man for a whole hard autumn and then get on a train. Emmett Royce took a brush to the granary door that fall, where his father's sowing date had been painted for 15 years, and he did not paint it out. He left the old date where it was and painted a second date beside it, the 5th of October, the cook's date. The two of them side by side on the door, the dead father's rule and the living woman's, both true now, one for a country without the fly and one for the country the fly had come to. By the harvest of 1888, the two names on the mailbox at the section road were Royce and Carden, and the harvest supper that year was their wedding supper, the same long table she had once set his crew's plates on, only she sat at the head of it now. The little soft field book kept getting written in two hands instead of one, showing dates and weather and yields. And it kept its underlined line at the front of it for a county that had finally learned to wait. Some knowledge only lives if somebody stubborn carries it off a broken farm in an apron pocket and refuses to let a proud man laugh it back into the ground. That is the size of it. The fly was the only villain in this story, and no man in it was ruined, only corrected. And a corrected man who marries the woman who corrected him has come out about as far ahead as a proud man ever does. If you have ever brought a thing back from a parent's pencil notes that everyone told you to leave behind, then this story was always for you. So tell me, before you go, was Emmett Royce a fool for keeping his father's date 15 years too long, or was he a good son who simply needed the right person to show him a better one? Leave your answer down below, tell me the county you are listening from tonight, and stay with us here for the next one.